Hey folks, today we're covering Developer Diary 4 Discovery. This is for EU5, and this is going to talk about how exploration works, and then also colonization, and how your colonial empires will play out in the game as well. So at the beginning here, they're just going to give us a background on this, from the first daring expeditions into the unknown seas, to the rise of sprawling colonial empires and global trade networks. This system in EU5 aims to capture the ambition, risks, and the rewards of charting the wider world. They talked about trade last week, so if you want to know how that works, that was the Developer Diary, about how trading, goods, all those kind of systems work. But today it's more around discovering new places and what you can do once you do that. So with the population and character systems, which we've covered before, exploration and colonization in EU5 will reach a whole new level of depth and immersion. There's a lot more going on in this. EU4 had exploration and colonization, but it was a very simple version of it. In EU5, as you'll see through this entire dev diary, there's a lot more going on, a lot of things that can affect it and how it plays out. And hopefully in each campaign you play, you'll see it play out in different ways, depending on what you do, and then also depending on what other nations do as well. So in EU5, you choose who will lead these expeditions, you choose who colonizes your colonies, you choose what your colonies do, how much control you have over them, and then eventually you'll trade between your colonies. All these different things that can play out, and they're going to cover most of them in this dev diary. And in our first screenshot, you can see a Castile campaign they played, and you can see how much Spain owns by the time they got through to this, which was the early 1700s. You've got the English colonies kind of pushed up into the northeast, and Spain has taken over everything. Now, this is just one campaign where they were playing as Castile and then Spain. Obviously, when you're playing, different nations will colonize these areas. Maybe they don't get successful. Who knows? All these different ways, again, how this can play out for you. So the first thing they're going to give us an overview of is exploration, like how you actually find these places. So exploration in EU5 is about more than simply revealing the map. It's about opportunity, ambition, and risk management. The ability to explore depends on your nation's technological advances, maritime presence, characters, and population. An advanced seafaring nation will find it easier to explore, while a more landlocked nation that doesn't focus on this is going to have a lot more difficulty in expanding out and making colonies. That just makes sense. You know, if you're Portugal, you're going to find it a lot easier to explore and find these new worlds than, say, if you're Brandenburg or someone like that doesn't have that history of seafaring. Now, you could do it as Brandenburg. You just have to get a port somewhere and then really invest into it. It's not impossible. As we've talked about through all the coverage of this game, everything is possible. It's just whether you have the ability to do it in every campaign and depending on what you're trying to do as well. So exploration and colonization are part of the new geopolitical tab in EU5. It's in this page that you will see all the possible explorations, all ongoing colonizations, and all possible places you can settle. This page will also tell you your colonial range. This is the area in which you can set up colonies, and you can see it on the screen now. Geopolitics, this is for Portugal, and you can see the known world, 36%. Colonial range, nearly 6,000, so that's how far they can colonize. Exploration cost, and that modifies due to advances, things like that make it cheaper and cheaper to do so. Colonial charters 8. Colonial migration 157, that is altered by a bunch of things as well. Cost of colonies plus 58%, that is modified again by a bunch of different mechanics they're going to cover later on. So you can see the bottom part of that as well, exploration, and this is how it works. You can recruit an explorer, and then you can send them off on these adventures. You can see a bunch of them that they've done here, how long it will take, how much it's going to cost, and then how far they've progressed as well. You can see in this example, 3 of them are currently active, and then the top one, they are preparing to go off on these adventures. So colonial range has a base value of 1,000, which gets increased by advances. Some of these advances are unique to some nations, such as Portugal, England, Castile. They have a bunch because historically they did this. However, any nation could explore and colonize in EU5, mainly after the Age of Discovery and the embracement of the New World's institution. The higher your colonial range, the further you can explore and further you can colonize. And then linked into that, you can see this screenshot, Oversea Exploration. This is an advance in the Age of Discovery, which increases the colonial range by 1,500 and allows open sea exploration. So that allows you to cross the Atlantic and things like that. You know, these things that you can technically do across the top of the map, I believe, like hopping over to Greenland, but it's very hard to do before you get this. And then you pick up this first advance. This helps you a little bit, and then ultimately your ships can get there in like one go once you unlock some more advances as well. So to do an exploration, you can select a variety of locations determined by your colonial range and your closest port, including ports owned by your subjects and allies. So that is a way you can kind of hopscotch around the world, I believe. You could set up a subject on some islands. I think you have to get a port there, and then you can refuel your expeditions, and they can go further and further, which is a good way to do this. especially if you haven't been able to pick up the advances that maybe other nations have done, and that helps you kind of catch up a little bit anyway. So you can choose the port in which your voyage launches from and assign a character to undertake the exploration. All types of exploration have an initial cost in ducats and either sailors or manpower, depending if this is via land or sea, because yes, most of this is going to be around exploring America, but there are areas where you can explore over land. Well, I guess when you land in America, you can then send these explorations into the heart of the land and do it that way as well. So there are different ways this can play out, and it does take different resources depending on which version you are trying to do. So once you choose a place you want to explore and a character to lead this exploration, this character is taken from your nation's pool of characters, but can also be historical explorers such as Columbus or Magellan. They were covered in a previous dev diary, and they are required through events as you play through the relevant nations. After that, your voyage will need to be prepared, requiring materials to be able to set sail, such as lumber, naval supplies, and liquor. Obviously, the most important of those being liquor. Without the proper resources, preparations will be halted, stopping until the proper resources are once again available. So you have to build all these up to the required needs, and then once that has happened, they can set sail. So you can see this in the next screenshot. Current constructions in Porto, and one of them is preparing for an exploration, and you can see lumber, tools, naval supplies, cloth and liquor, and getting those into that market. So then you can fill out these requirements, and then you can set these off on their adventures, and it'll all go perfectly well. Nothing bad will happen. Well, they're going to cover that in a minute. So once your nation has prepared an exploration, the voyage will set sail into the unknown. The exploration's duration depends on two main factors: the distance of the exploration compared to your nation's naval range. Naval range can be increased through a bunch of ways, but one of them is an advance called Naval Ambitions that is available in the Age of Discovery. And then the second modifier is terrain of the region being explored. So this could be harsh open seas, coastal waters, or rugged inland areas. So again, if you're trying to explore like the Rockies, that's going to be slower. Or if you're doing like the plains of central North America, that's going to be a little bit quicker, a little bit easier for people to travel over. The time it takes to complete an exploration action is calculated by comparing the total exploration cost against your nation's monthly exploration progress. By default, progress begins at 0.05 per month, but it is increased by advances. You can see that all the way through this dev diary. A lot of advances that make this a lot easier to complete. Government reforms and the skill of your explorer also affect this number. During the Age of Discovery, nations also benefit from a flat 0.25 exploration progress, reflecting the surge of ambition that fueled early voyages of discovery. And then the next screenshot will show us the exploring of the Gulf of Mexico by Portugal. You can see the monthly progress 1.11. Base value for this country is 0.05, as they just said. And then you can see the Age of Discovery bonus. And then they have two different advances, Beat to Windward and Pursuing the Waves. That is giving them 0.10. And then their Explorer seems particularly good. He's given 0.5, which is the same as all the previous bonuses added together. And then you can see the total cost of this is 24.19. That is due to the base cost, and then the naval range, as they talked about earlier, and then also the terrain they're exploring as well. So as you can see, this will get easier and easier as you progress through the game, especially if you lean into the things that help you. Like if you become an outward nation, they're going to talk about that later on. You can obviously go away from this and just say, look, I'm not interested in exploring. Let the other nations do that, and then I'm going to do some warfare to expand, or whatever you're trying to do in your campaigns. Maybe you'll let somebody get these colonies and then just take them off them. That also works as well. So there's so many ways you can get some of these colonial empires. You don't have to found them yourselves. You can also just take them off other people as well. You can see in the next screenshot, this is the Age of Discovery bonuses. So every age in the game gives these different bonuses that leans into what's happening in this age of the game. So this gives you exploration monthly progress 0.25, as they already said. Control impact on war score minus 40%, expected army size plus 200%, antagonism religion influence plus 15%, and then levy combat efficiency minus 20%, gradually moving away from levies. Levy maintenance plus 25%, Navy levy size minus 75%. So again, in this era, really starting to move into these more constructed navies, and that is leaning into that as well. Colonial maintenance minus 25%. That's just going to get better and better as you progress through the ages. And then in this age, you also unlock hegemons and outward versus inward. So exploration is never without its risks. Whilst an expedition is underway, a variety of events can occur that can influence its progress. This can range from favourable winds to unexpected discoveries that will speed up exploration to storms or disease that can slow it down as well. In the most severe cases, explorations may suffer devastating setbacks, an explorer might perish, or a voyage may fail entirely, forcing you to reconsider your plans for overseas expansion. So yes, you can fund these explorations, and then maybe they just totally fail and you've got nothing out of it. But again, that is what happened historically, and that is going to be shown in this game as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in EU4 they always succeeded unless you stopped funding them. I can't remember exactly, but in EU5 it looks like they're a little bit more risky. There's so many different things that can affect it. So it's not as easy in this game to just select somewhere. You're definitely going to be successful. These little things can affect your explorers and then they can fail, or maybe they'll get there even faster. Who knows? All these different ways it can play out. The consequences of these events are not also just confined to the expedition itself. They can ripple back home, shaping the societal values of your nations. These events may inspire curiosity, ambition, or even religious zeal, while disasters can sow caution, disillusionment, or resistance to further overseas ventures. So again, you can lean into this, or if some bad things happen, people in your nation could be coming up to you and saying, we don't want to do this. Why don't we just stay internal? Don't do this exploring. It didn't work out well for us. Maybe think about it, but you're probably just going to do another expedition. You're not going to just say, nah, do you know what? I'm perfectly fine. I guess it depends how bad the modifiers are. You can see an example of this here, the calmest sea. Marcus Sousa and his ships have been stuck in the Indian Horn due to there being no wind or current to propel them. It is beyond human hands. We must trust in a higher force is one of the options. Or there must be something we can do. Try everything. If you choose that second option, as you can see, exploring the Indian Horn is minus 1.58 progress. So that's going to slow down your progress in exploring that area, pretty obviously. But it will also change your societal value towards innovative, because you're saying to them, we can figure something out. Let's get this working. Let's get this exploration moving again. It's also going to cost you 16 gold. So if you don't have the money, if you don't want to take out a loan, maybe you might have to say the top option. Unfortunately, we don't see what the top option is. I imagine it moves you towards like more traditional options or something along those lines. The next event they're going to show us is called a guiding bird. The monotonous sailings of your explorer and his fleet around India has basically been unchanged for a while. With no weather changes or any alteration to the appearance of the surrounding seas, the crew is starting to get a little bit bored. So you can see it would be best if we follow it, or seagulls only go out to sea to die, right? So this is where they've seen a bird and they thought, oh, we must be near land then because there's a bird here. But in this example, well, maybe they've flown out that far because, they're going out to sea to die. So you can see the second option there. We will lose 5 prestige, but exploring the Indian North Agulhas will get 0.56 progress. So you lose some prestige by, I guess, like following superstition, but it will actually help you with your progress in this expedition. Unlike EU4, new terrain is not discovered until the exploration is complete and the voyagers have come home, giving access to new explorations, and in the case of land being explored, new access to colonization opportunities. So you don't press the button, they go, and you get like a progress report where it shows you like which bits of land they found, which is how it worked in EU4, as they said. In this game, you send them off, and then you've just got to wait for them to come back, and once they get back to you, if they do get back to you, they will then give you the maps of that region. It's such a better way for this to work. This is obviously historically how it mostly happens. Sometimes, yes, they'd send a ship back with some maps and say, this is what we found so far. But for the most part, they sent off the whole fleet. And then when they came back, they would then show them the maps of the land they discovered. And that is how it's going to play out in EU5. This system ensures that exploring in EU5 is not just about sending out ships. It's about timing, preparation, and weighing up risks against rewards, choosing when to explore, the level of the characters you have to send on those voyages, and how much resources you want to put aside for this will shape the speed in which you will discover the rest of the world. So yes, all these things are important, as they've already covered through this dev diary. When you want to explore, where you want to explore, do you have a good character that can even explore those areas, and do you have access to the resources to actually be able to build up the fleet and then send them out as well. So you might be playing a nation where you think, oh, I'll be able to explore very easily, or maybe you get unlucky with your characters, which is going to slow you down, or maybe you just don't have access to the resources that you need, and then that's going to slow you down as well. So many different ways. All these different systems they've talked about every week in all these dev diaries are so interconnected, and how they all play together is how it's going to affect all the rest of the game as well. So once you've found these new lands, what's the next step? Well, in most cases, you're going to be establishing a colony, and through the Colonization tab in the geopolitical page, you can review all potential colonial charters available for your nation. Any uncolonized land within your colonial range can be targeted for settlement, providing you have the ducats to start the colonial charter and the ducats to maintain it as well. Colonial charters are on a provincial level, with colonial charters completing when every location is fully colonized in any given province. So you've got to fill up the whole province, and then you get that into your colonial empire. You can see that colonial page here. So again, the known world, the colonial range, a lot of the things we saw previously, but in the second half of the UI, you can now see all these colonial charters. You can pick one of these. You can even see the adjacent ones. These are obviously next to another colonial charter that you've already set up. For the other ones, you can see how far away they are, how much it's going to cost, and obviously the location of them as well. Colonizing, however, is not a simple undertaking. It is a process that is both costly and time-consuming, demanding that population from their homeland leave their previous lives and migrate to a distant frontier. When setting up a new colonial charter, you'll choose which province you want your new settlers to come from. So it isn't just pulling from your entire nation. You're literally saying, if you're playing as England, hey, Cornwall, I'm going to take population from you, and you're going to go settle the New World in this specific location. Once your charter has set up, it can be more natural, but to begin with, I guess it makes sense because you're setting sail from a certain place to set up this charter. So it would make sense. You'd say, hey, people from here, do you want to go to the New World and find a new life? Yes, okay, get on these boats and let's go set up a new town. And then once it's been founded, other people would then join, not necessarily from the same location inside your empire. And you can see that on the screen here, all these different red arrows. These are all the different colonies they're setting up, and Portugal's sending people from certain locations into those different colonies whilst they're trying to set them up as well. So you can see how it's going to affect the nation. And then obviously you don't want to depopulate your main nation too much. So it's all a balancing act. Like, you want to get your colonies up and running, but you also don't want to depopulate your homeland because that is funding your colonies as well. So it is going to be one of these very fine balancing acts, depending on which thing you want to do, and also how big your nation is as well. The difficulty of colonization varies greatly depending on the land you're actually trying to colonize. Regions with dense native populations will require more time and investment to claim compared to somewhere that is sparsely inhabited. Obviously, if there's nobody living there, it's a lot easier to set things up. And then on top of this, location modifiers such as harsh climates, limited arable land, and the presence of diseases like malaria will slow colonial progress and increase the risk for settlers. That is one thing, especially for Africa. If you're trying to settle Africa as a European, malaria really causes problems for your colonies, making it a lot harder to settle there. So again, more factors to take into when you are doing these colonies. You can also increase the speed in which you colonize by increasing your colonial migration. This migration determines how many population will leave your homeland to settle in your colonial charters. This value can be increased by advances in technology, laws, government reforms, and having the outward societal value, and also increasing maritime presence in the region in which you are sending people from. But it can also be decreased by the distance from the region you are trying to send settlers from, and having the inward societal value. Again, they're going to show that in a minute. The outward versus inward societal value will get activated in the Age of Discovery, so you can't interact with that at all until the Age of Discovery. This new societal value will appear, and then you've got to decide which way you want to go and the bonuses that's going to give you. So next they're going to show us a tooltip for monthly migration from Portugal in 1509. So you can see this here. Total migration is 27 per month, so not massive numbers here. And what is modifying this is colonial investments, maritime presence in Iberia, distance from Lisbon, and then the outward societal value, and then two different advances with plus 50% each. And then they've got the law policy, settle colonies, and that is giving plus 100% as well. So again, all these different modifiers they've stacked up. And as they progress through this age, they're going to get more and more of these, which is going to help them colonize that bit easier as they do progress. Next, they're going to show us those societal values. So the first one here is outward. This is all about building up colonies and things like that. So cultural tradition, minus 50%, because not everything here is going to be good for you. Power projection, plus 5. Antagonism, language influence, minus 50%. Diplomatic capacity, plus 33%, because you are going to be interacting with different nations, and then also your colonies as well. And then monthly colonial migration plus 100%. So this is all about your nation looking outwards and saying, let's build up these colonies, let's explore the world. We're not as interested with like internal politics. Obviously, that stuff does go on, but we're looking outwards into the rest of the world. Obviously, the opposite of that is inwards. And for this one, you get plus 25% crown power, cultural tradition plus 50%, monthly control 0.5, antagonism language influence plus 50%, and then monthly colonial migration minus 50%. So even if you're inward, you might pick up the odd colony here or there. Obviously, this is a scale you gradually move across. It isn't binary. You don't just say, I want to be outward. It gradually moves there depending on what you're doing, events that happen, different advances that you have, all these kind of things that will move you towards that direction. But it doesn't negate you doing other things. Like, you could be outward and then set up a few colonies and say, that's enough for me, I'm not that worried about it anymore. And then you would gradually move towards inwards after that. But you can see it does have a massive effect on migration. So if you are playing the colonization game, you're probably going to be outward in nearly all cases you can just see that migration is so much better. If you've got the population to send to colonies, you're going to want them getting there faster because then they can get set up and then you can get some investment back from them. In EU5, colonization is a serious investment in ducats, population and time, and like any investment, it carries risk. The rewards for overseas expansion may take decades or even centuries to fully materialize in your campaigns, so it is a lot of investment and then you might not see the return for a long time. Resources in EU5 are fixed and tied to each location outside of the Columbian exchange system, which they talked about last week. This means that every settlement decision matters. Choosing where to start a charter can be guided by resource gathering operations in each location, whether it produces fur, gold, silver, sugar, all these different things that you might need at home. Maybe you're setting up a bunch of distillers. Well, I'm going to go for the sugar and something else maybe. If you're just interested in money, well, I'll go for the gold and silver. If you're trying to make a bunch of clothing maybe, you'll go for furs. It really depends what you want to do in your campaigns. Maybe you'll just take a bit of everything and then trade it back home and just make a bunch of money that way as well. This system naturally encourages a pattern of historical colonization. Regions rich in resources are likely to become hotbeds of competition, while less valuable lands are left untouched to the later centuries. Investing early also gives certain nations powerful advantages. For example, Portugal can establish a foothold in Brazil for its gold and gems, while Spain can push aggressively into Mesoamerica to seize all its wealth as it did historically. You can see the RGOs of Brazil in this screenshot. So again, as they were saying, maybe you're coming here and you're after a certain resource. Well, I'm going to colonize that area first. Or maybe in a different campaign, you're not as interested in that resource, so you might settle somewhere else instead. In the next screenshot, you can see the same thing for Mesoamerica, as they said, kind of Portugal and Castile historically where they settled. And you can see the different bonuses. Look at all those gems in this example that you might want to take and bring home. Founding a colonial charter in EU5 does not instantly grant exclusive ownership of a territory. Instead, multiple nations can target the same province, creating a colonial race where rival powers compete to establish dominance. Locations within a contested charter may be divided between competing colonizers. Victory in this race comes down to the nation being able to send the largest number of population to the province of the colonial charter first. The first will eventually secure control and complete the colonial charter. However, the story does not end at this point. Population sent by rival colonizers is not erased. They remain as part of the settled colony, contributing to the growth and character of that realm. So I guess as England, you might be settling in Florida. It's you and Spain kind of fighting it off between each other. And maybe you hit the requirement first, but there could be like 75% of the requirements for Spain. They stick around, so then you're going to have to try convert them, all these different things. Some of them are going to be naturally more compatible with your nation, but just think if it's something totally different. Like imagine Morocco or somewhere is settling, you beat them to it, so you're at 100%, Morocco's at like 95%, so you've got to deal with all these Moroccan population that are going to be in your lands of this colonial empire, and then deal with them, maybe try convert them, maybe try expel them, maybe just let them stay there if they're a big enough number, make them a little bit more accepted culture-wise. So it's not as easy as EU4 where you just colonize somewhere and it's part of your realm and it's just your population. In EU5, like everything else, you got the complication or the benefit of all these different systems working together. So the population system really affecting your colonies once you set them up. I guess in most cases, it's probably mainly just going to be you, but there are going to be these examples where you have two nations trying to colonize the same area, and then you do have to kind of deal with the consequences of that. Or I guess if you lose, I wonder if enough of your population is there, they might rebel against them, take over the colony, and then I wonder if you can bring them in. I guess you could as like a vassal afterwards. We'll see more about that, I guess, when we play the game. But again, all these different ways it can play out as well. This means that colonies that were contested during their founding may end up with diverse and multi-ethnic populations, shaped by the contributions of multiple nations. Such diversity can lead to unique opportunities and challenges. This also means that contesting a charter later than others can lead to a loss of population and control of another nation. So yes, that is another side of this as well. If you're doing one of these competitions almost, like if you realize you're going to lose, you really want to cut off sending more people there because you're really sending them into like nothing for you. So you're still sending population to that area, but you're going to get nothing out of it. So I guess you'll always be thinking, if I'm not going to overtake this other nation, I'll stop trying to colonize this area. I'll move to somewhere else and try colonize there instead. I guess if it's so close, you might hope some events pop up. Maybe you can send more people there, so then you can catch up and overtake them. But again, another thing you're going to be thinking about, it's not as easy as EU4, where it was very binary, like that's my land, and then I colonize it, and that's all good. You're going to have to see how it plays out. Next, they're going to show us some example of these. The first one here, a very funny one actually. Portugal and the Papal States are trying to colonize the province of Temne, with the Papal States having a head start due to starting the colony first, but with Portugal's current colonial migration, they're about to catch up. So you can see here the Portuguese colony, the Papal colony, and how far they've progressed. But as you can see, the Papal one has started to slow down. Well, in fact, it's hit 0 now, whereas Portugal's sending 27 people, so they're going to catch up and overtake. Unless the papacy can send some more people, they're probably busy doing other things though. I guess if you're playing as the Papal States, you could go colonizing. It would be pretty funny actually to see how that plays out. You can see in the next example, this is a location where multiple people are trying to colonize it, and you're going to be fighting up against all these different realms trying to do it. You can see the numbers here. Some realms sending 100 people, some 41, some 39. Their progression, and then who's going to win this land. Again, with this example, it looks very close here as to who's going to win it. And then all those populations other people have sent are going to stay there, but they get no benefit of it. Obviously, the people who take over the colony are going to see those benefits. I guess if it's very diverse, I guess it could be quite hard to actually get a good benefit out of it. This colonial competition can come to a head for Catholic nations during the Age of Discovery, triggering one of history's most famous compromises, the Treaty of Tordesillas. There has been a whole dev diary about this previously, but they are going to quickly run over it here. This situation will be triggered when two competing Catholic nations in the New World complete colonial charters in the Age of Discovery. When this happens, a dynamic situation fires where both nations go to the Pope and ask him to arbitrate in this dispute. By leveraging influence within the church, each colonizer can then attempt to secure exclusive claims to lands. And then, as they said, this is a dynamic event, so it isn't locked into historically what happened. That was Spain and Portugal. They divided the world through this treaty, but in EU5 it can be different nations that have the same outcomes. Next, they're going to show us a version of this where it's actually Portugal and Sweden. You can see those two rulers in the screenshot. You can see the Treaty of Lisbon. You can see the start date as well. You can also see here the origin of the line. That is the line in which the New World is going to be divided between these two nations. You can move that east or west depending on what you want to do during these negotiations. You can also see the state of the treaty. The treaty is being discussed, and then once it's fully discussed and completed, you'll see that progress of ratification go all the way around, and then you'll sign this treaty, and then people will abide by it or not abide by it. Again, that was all covered in that previous dev diary. They also covered what all those main actions mean. I guess most of them are quite obvious. Claim an area, claim a conflicting area, revoke a claim that you've got, push to settle treaty, get this finished as quick as possible. Shifting the line, that's where you can move that line depending on where you want it to be. And then exchange sides, that's the most crazy one, where you can say like all of this bit that Spain had and all this bit that Portugal had historically, well, last minute, I'm just going to switch them over. So I want the bit that Spain had, and Spain will get the bit that Portugal had. So again, these different ways this can play out. It isn't set up historically how it happened. It's so dynamic every time that you play through it. And again, this is for the Catholic nations. If you're not part of those, you just ignore this. Like, who cares what the Pope says? I'm just going to settle wherever I want to do. In order for colonial charters to complete, at least 1,000 population must be present in every location of the charter, and you need 36% of the population in each location to be either your primary culture or an accepted culture, and 36% of the population to be your nation's religion as well. This means that a location with 20,000 natives will take much longer to colonize than a location with 200 natives, because they're going to offset how much of your population works towards those. So you're going to have a lot more people in that first example than the 200 natives. Versus 1,000 people, they're not really going to affect those numbers that much. But if there are 20,000 natives, well, as you can see, the culture and religious requirements are not going to be hit for a long time. So you're going to have to keep pushing more and more people into that colony so that it will finish. When a location has been colonized, the natives will become a tribesman population, a population class that's harder to promote compared to peasants. I think some realms have special cabinet decisions that speed that up. I know with Scotland, you get one where you can promote people up a lot faster from that class. I don't know if that's specific just to Scotland though. When a colonial charter is completed, the new land officially comes under your nation's authority, but what you do with it is entirely up to you. EU5 offers multiple ways to handle this. So you can see the first one here. You can create a new colonial subject, establish a semi-autonomous entity that governs the territory on your behalf. If the region has low market access, this will also create a new market in this area, helping the colony develop economically. So this is a good option if you don't have much control over that area. The next one is play as colonial subject. Step into the shoes of your new colony, guiding its growth and carving out unique destiny from its mother country. Similar to the first option, if market access is low, a new market center will be created as well. So this is really cool. You settle North America as England, but then you just say, do you know what? I don't want to play as England anymore. I'm going to play as the 13 colonies or whatever version you get of that. And then you play as this colony, try get independence, or maybe not get independence and just play out as them anyway. The next option is integrate into an existing colonial subject. Pretty obvious this one. If the new province is bordered by an existing colonial subject, it'll just get moved into that one to kind of consolidate everything together. And then the last one, retain direct control. Keep the land as part of your core empire, allowing you to exploit its resources directly, but also requiring more active management and of course less control over it. I would think when you first start colonizing, you're going to be setting up a colonial subject, merging ones that are nearby to it. But you could have a few different colonial subjects, a couple of these different colonies growing on their own. The direct control one, I would imagine this is more for if you have land nearby to you that you can take over. I guess long term, you could start doing this. Once you've built up all your advances, it might not be as bad as it sounds, but I think you'll get more out of it by just setting up these colonies, letting them play out themselves semi-autonomously, and then get the rewards out of it that you can. You can see in the next screenshot the example of these. In this one, they're going to do form a new colonial subject. This area will get a town, a clay pit, a lumber mill, and a mason, and then the forestry will employ 1,000 more laborers or slaves. And then also it will found this new country in this example. And then as I said with the previous ones, you could merge other ones into this as you explore outside of this area. And then depending on where you colonize, sending population to your newly established colonies may be necessary to fully utilize the resources. So once you've filled it up with those 1,000 population, if you win that colony as it were, it isn't the end of it. You're going to continue to send people there because they're going to be building up their industry, building up these RGOs, and you need population for that. They could naturally get there, but it's going to be very slow. You're going to be sending more population to really get the most out of it as well. You can do this through the send people to the colonies cabinet action, and advance in the Age of Discovery allows you to unlock this cabinet action. In fertile but barely populated locations, population growth will be faster than back in your home country, leading to huge population growth opportunities that can also increase with the settlement building. This building is not limited to colonies, but requires the location to have below 5% population capacity, a requirement that would be more prevalent in the New World locations versus your homelands. So yes, you can build this at home, but it's going to be very difficult to have a location that has so little people in it that you can then build this settlement. And you can see it on the screen now, settlement, this is an infrastructure building. You can see migration attraction +1, population growth +1%, which is actually quite a lot of population growth. So you're going to want to get these built as soon as you can in these colonies. Get them building up their population, and then they can put their population to good work. What's that good work? Obviously, making you more money. That's what we're all here for. So as I said earlier on, every nation can colonize an EU5, whether you're Portugal or the Shogun. The option and opportunity is always there. And then for those of you who want a more encyclopedic way for this game to play out, you can set in the game rules that only European countries can colonize, and that will make it play out, I guess, a little bit more historically. But if you don't have this option turned on, any nation can colonize the New World. So you could have, as I said earlier, Mali, Morocco, the Ottomans, Egypt or the Mamluks, like all these different nations could colonize the New World. It would be very difficult for some of them to do it, but if you're playing as, say, Mali, if you do very well, it won't be that difficult for you to colonize the New World. And then the last bit of this dev diary is going to cover colonial subjects and colonial trade. Again, this links into last week's dev diary quite a bit, but we are going to cover it in this video. So as they say here, deciding on whether to directly control a new colonized land or establish it as a colonial subject is a fundamental strategic decision in EU5. Both approaches carry benefits and trade-offs, shaped not only by your empire's strengths, but also its stability. Directly controlling these colonies grants your nation full sovereignty over the resources and output. However, distance comes at a cost. Far-flung provinces are harder to control. Direct rule is best reserved for strategic locations or compact colonial holdings. Creating a subject places authority in the hands of the local colonial government, which operates with its own national capital within its territory. This alleviates the burden of direct admin, while also ensuring your empire benefits from its colonies. Overlords can directly build buildings and roads in their colonial subject and can increase their RGO levels. Directly investing in your colony in this way not only increases the colony's wealth, but that will increase your wealth as well, because they give a proportion of their profits to you. So that is why you would invest your own money into these colonies, even if you don't directly control them, because ultimately that means they'll be more profitable, they'll be more expansionist, all these kind of things, and that will ultimately help you. I guess ultimately, it means they might get powerful enough to overthrow you, but that's a worry for another time. This is all about getting the most out of your colonies, so even if you hand them off to somebody else, you can still invest in them, you can still get involved. They're basically like a vassal at that point. and then you can see the rewards once you do so. And then these colonial subjects provide the Overlord with the following contributions. So 2.5% of monthly income, monthly manpower and sailors to reinforce your armies and fleets, 33% of their trade advantage and trade capacity, representing the integration of their markets into your own. You can increase this by an additional 50% at the cost of 33% subject loyalty. So it isn't just the direct income. Obviously, these new markets also affect your trading as well. Loyal colonial subjects will also join all offensive and defensive wars of their overlord. And then also there's a bunch of actions. 2 examples is siphon income or press sailors. This will give you a short boost of ducats or sailors. Obviously, they won't be happy about that, but if you're desperate for some money, you could do siphon income and then take that directly from them. I think both of those actions are available if you have normal vassals, but this is a colonial version of it. So you're going to get some benefits, even if you need something short-term from them. Colonial subjects are not passive entities either. They possess their own cabinet and can enact cabinet actions. This makes them semi-autonomous partners within your empire, useful allies, but also potential rivals if their loyalty is strained. So again, they kind of work like vassals, a little bit different because you get that direct access to their market and all those different bonuses they talked about already. And then the last thing they're going to talk about is development of the new world once you get this up and going. So with the new interconnected systems in EU5, development in the new world is designed to be gradual and an organic process. Colonies do not instantly transform into bustling cities or economic hubs. Instead, growth unfolds over time, shaped by how and when the colonization began. Regions that are colonized earlier will naturally develop earlier, gaining population, infrastructure, and trade connections before their later settled counterparts. This reflects the historical pace of change, where the earliest colonial footholds became centers of wealth and power. And then next they're going to show us 2 maps showing off this progress. So as your campaign progresses, you will see the world dynamically evolve, with colonial regions rising and falling in importance as they did historically. Your decisions on where to invest first will leave a lasting mark on the geopolitical and economic landscape of your campaigns as you play through it. And as I said, they're going to show us an example of this. This is the development map of the Americas in 1337. So when the game starts, you can see that bit in Mesoamerica. You can see the North American tribes. You can see a little bit of stuff going on in like Peru and different areas in South America as well. And then the next map they're going to show us is how it looks in 1762. This is a campaign where Great Britain, Spain, France, and Portugal all had a lot of colonies, and you can see the outcome of that on the map. A lot of development in Mesoamerica. You can see the North American tribes with a lot of development as well. I don't know if this matches the campaign they were talking about at the very start of this dev diary, because you can see in North America, not as much development. Maybe the English or French colonies, whoever colonized here in this campaign, didn't really get much going in their colonies, because you can see the Central America, the Caribbean islands, they've got a lot more development. Some of that could just be natural things, but as they're saying, like, the colonizers have affected things, I imagine the Spanish Empire was in full effect, and that is why you can see that development growth in those areas. But anyway, folks, that is the end of the dev diary this week. It has been a long one. I apologize for keeping you for so long. If you have stuck around to this point, do hit that like button if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let me know what you think about this dev diary, how colonizing, exploring, how all these systems are going to work. I think this looks fantastic. This is a whole side of the game you could just focus on and ignore the wars in Europe or ignore the wars in Africa or wherever you're colonizing from, and just build up all these colonial nations, see what you want to do with them, see how they play out. Are you going to have these wars of independence, and then how that affects your campaigns as well? And I think, like, mechanically how it works is just a really good way. It's a lot less binary than in EU4. You have to invest in them, and then even when you've set up one of these colonies, it's all around making it expand. How are you going to expand it out? Are you going to give it autonomy? You're going to try and keep it for yourself? And then how you interact with those colonies as well. So again, let me know what you think in the comments, but we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you all next time.